And there we go, man. Goldfinger is up and running.
All right, sweet. Pretty good tribute to Sean Connery, I think. All right, now we're going into Thanksgiving, Christmas, but then January. I don't know.
The Replacements. It's perfect for the NFL playoffs.
Oh, good thinking, bro. All right. All right, but first things first, let's try to get to the Thanksgiving special before. All right. Now, Parker, what'd you do?
I went to the next movie.
Oh, you didn't. You turned off the whole podcast.
I must have hit the wrong button.
We'll get it back on. Months could be going
Yes,
by.
sir. Yes, sir.
Oh, you got to get that thing fixed. We're back, and we have the next movie. And it's only been 2 months.
2 months? Even in 2021, nothing works, man. Wait a minute. That means it's time to do the replacements.
Most triumphant, dude.
Yeah!
Yeah!
Hello and welcome back to Jim and Parker's excellent podcast.
Excellent.
And today we're coming at you with one of our kind of personal favorite films. Is it a cult classic? Is it not? Is it a really good movie or is it just a lot of fun? It's The Replacements.
Righteous, dude. Yeah, the Replacements is a 2000 comedy directed by Howard Deutsch, starring Keanu Reeves and Gene Hackman, and it's about these ragtag group of misfits being brought in to fill a gap left by striking football players just before the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. And this is a really interesting film because this is based not exactly in real life, but based off real life events of the NFL players strike and walkout. So it's very interesting. Also, kind of a fun fact: the team that all these players play on is the Washington Sentinels. Funnily enough, the year of the NFL lockout, the team that won was what's then the Washington Redskins, today the Washington football team. So fun little piece of trivia there for you. But going into this movie, this is like a very interesting film because looking at it, it's not the best written film ever. It's not the best directed film, best edited, or anything like that. But it's a ton of fun. It's one of our personal favorites. I actually have a little Joe Flacco t-shirt from Barstool Sports because I just love this film. It's just a ton of great fun. It brings in some really great actors and actresses to just make it just filled with a little bit of action, a little bit of sentiment, a little bit of sweetness, and a little bit of humor, just all blended into one. And so we'll get started kind of talking about why is this film so popular? Because this film came out in the early 2000s, and even to today, I can still find this movie on TV and cable. It's on, Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon every once in a while. And I think what plays into part of it is that there's a little bit of a sports athlete in most of us, if not all of us. And for any of us who played high school sports, college sports, or even professional sports, if you're watching our podcast and you're in the pros, please let us know. We'd love to talk to you. But all of us have that little bit of sentiment of, what if we could go back and play one more game or one more match? Like, what would it be like to, throw on the uniform, throw on the pads, get back out there just one more time? And I think that movie is really the precipice of all of that. It just fills you up with a lot of those emotions. And then from there, it just takes you on a 2-hour fun ride going on from all of it.
Exactly. The Replacements is, well, I missed it when I was a kid, but I started to see it more when I was in high school. And I just remember the first time I was actually a little confused by it because I couldn't quite put it into a box. But this when I watched it more and more, I realized that's kind of the genius of this movie is you really can't put it quite into a tiny little box. It is a blend of an 80s sports movie and an 80s comedy and some 2000s kind of humor and there's an earnestness about this movie that I think is just immensely appealing, and I think more so than a lot of comedies that were coming out at the time, like Grandma's Boy or American Pie, which are funny, but they were just a little too much on the extreme end of things.
We're a
But
little
this one,
raunchy.
yeah, a little too raunchy, kind of going more for Animal House. Whereas I think that's part of the reason why his director Howard Deutsch worked a lot with John Hughes in the 80s. And there was an earnestness about those films that he directed that carries over into this one. And again, part of it too is it's not super hilarious. It's just it's got enough good jokes in there, but there's also that edge where you can still follow it as a legitimate sports film or a redemption story. And I think part of that comes from the lead actor Keanu Reeves,
Mhm.
who I think this was a very strange time for him because this was right after The Matrix came out, and he was very popular, kind of divisive as an actor. People he let me put it this way: he was not the internet's boyfriend yet. Back then, he was still kind of that guy where you were trying to suss him out. You didn't know if he was good, you didn't know if he was bad. Nowadays, people mostly agree that he's awesome because of John Wick, but back then it was a little bit of a hard issue to tackle.
Yeah.
Well, hard as in is he good? Is he bad? I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah, it's very interesting because yeah, you're absolutely right, Jim. Today he's a national treasure. Like people love going up to him, seeing him on the streets, taking photographs with him. He's also just a great human. He's very humble. He's not showboaty. He's not a an asshole or anything like that. He's just a great, genuine guy. And I think especially with the John Wick trilogy or saga, because there's a fourth one coming out, people have really gotten to see like this renaissance of Keanu Reeves. And then along with that, the new Matrix movie coming out, the another Bill and Ted movie that came out about a year or two ago. It's really been awesome to see him come back to life a little bit within like the mainstream. And along with that, also having a couple other big actors in here, most specifically Gene Hackman. And again, Hackman was very big in the late 70s through to about like the early 90s. And so he hasn't been in a lot since then. At least can't remember anything big off the top of my head. But this was like a fun film for him to be in because Hackman works best when he has a sense of seriousness about him, but also has a little bit of fun in him. There's actually a lot of elements of kind of his Lex Luthor from the original Superman that you
Very
can
true.
see within this because he loves having fun, cheering on his boys, but also isn't afraid to throw on the serious face and absolutely just rip him a new one. It's really great. And as well with that, there are a couple other good actors in here. Other ones that are kind of still famous today, Jon Favreau, obviously, and then Rhys Ifans, who's been in a few movies. He was in Logan a few years ago as the albino kind of super mutant. Really interesting there.
Yep.
And then of also major note here are the NFL commentators. And Jim, I couldn't put my finger on it. Do you remember who these guys are? Were they someone famous?
You know, it's just escaping me, dude. I don't know. I feel like one of them had an entire video game series named after him, and
Was it Mike FIFA? Was it? It had to be Mike FIFA. That's who it was, right?
yeah, that's no. Hold on, something mission. So,
Maiden?
gee,
Madden.
that's who it
Ah,
is.
yes.
The guy from Little Giants.
Yeah. So also of note in here, which was probably one of the coolest things when this movie first came out, was the two NFL commentators are John Madden and Pat Summerall, which are legends. Like they're both in the NFL Hall of Fame, if I remember correctly, and they're just legendary. And there was a really good kind of inside joke that I'll throw it back over to Jim for because he caught it on the original rewatch and I did not. So I'll throw it back over to Jim for a hot second.
So John Madden is a really great sports commentator for obvious reasons, and he is a legend. And I think he was one of the first people to start using the yellow pen graphic to help outline a play for the common viewer and show like this is how that works. And oh, look at that, that worked perfectly. Well, this time he poked fun at his own little use of the tool by slipping in a little innuendo here and there, but I won't dream of revealing exactly what it is here on the podcast. You'll have to watch the film for yourselves. But when I caught it, I said, okay, that's really classy that John Madden can A, take a joke, B, execute one. So that the movie's full of those little cute touches that, like I said, are either super funny or hey, that actually got a good chuckle.
Yeah. And I think that's really where this film just kind of hits its stride, is that it finds that balance. This film is all about the balance between the action, the comedy, humor, tenderness. It's all about just finding, like, how do we kind of slip in just through the mainstream, where, kind of like Jim was saying earlier, it's a little edgy enough that people are going to get it. And it's not just going to be run of the mill and basic, but it's fun enough that people are still going to enjoy it. And it's not going to be grossing people out, or it's going to be so over people's heads with the writing and, like, the vocabulary, that people are not going to understand what's going on. So it really does just stride that line really well within kind of the barriers of edgy but not too edgy. And I think this also is like a really kind of like fun film watching if you're, like I said, if you are on a sports team or anything, or even just in a team in general, because there's some good team building elements they really tackle. They talk about, coming from different backgrounds and building a cohesive team to go on and, make it to the championship and the playoffs. They talk about facing fears. There's huge pieces of motivational speaking, playing in the big moments, even though there's going to be a lot of pressure and, a lot of tough times with it. So I think this film also is like kind of like a fun film to watch for, just your team building sort of environment. But then along with that, Jim, what were some other like big scenes that you really enjoyed watching, ones that stuck out for you?
Well, you were talking about the athlete in all of us, and I certainly connected to the movie. I would certainly love to play football again. Pop the pads and pop on the helmet, get out on the field and play under the lights. That's the kind of feeling that the players have in this movie, and I totally sympathize with. And there's the big scene of them bonding after they get into a bar fight with the admittedly 1980s bullies in the form of the striking star players. Was they get thrown into jail and they sing "I Will Survive" together as they sort of bond over that in the jail cell. They line dance, they do all that typical 2000 stuff. And it actually just reminded me when I was playing football in high school, we were in the weight room and one of the guys was pumping iron. And it wasn't "I Will Survive," but we all started belting out "Build Me Up Buttercup." and I and when I watched the replacements again, it just took me right back to that day in the weight room, and everybody was just singing, and we were all together. We were pumping each other up. And it was just like, okay, that it's just that kind of ground level kind of entertainment that the replacements does really well. And one thing that I appreciated as the film student is they actually play with a lot of tropes. Like they're kind of smart about it. One of the things is you have the bully in the form of the quarterback who's on strike. And normally in this kind of sports movie, the hero gives up and he kind of hides away in shame, and Falco does it too. But what's great is he comes back into the locker room and the team's at its lowest point. He says, "I'm back and I'm ready to play." Now, in a normal sports film, everybody would be really mad at him and he would have to earn their respect back and kind of go through the motion. Think of The Longest Yard, which kind of started that trope. Here, as soon as he shows up, he says, "I'm ready to play." All the players just say, "Oh, yeah, all right, let's do it." And they just throw the other quarterback out of the locker room. And I thought, that's really funny. It's just like they cut out all that stuff. And we're just like, oh, yeah, there's our guy. He's back now. And he's just back, no wasted time.
Mhm.
So I really enjoyed that. I just thought, okay, that's a breath of fresh air.
Yeah. No, definitely. And then along with that, also something that I also really enjoy is that there's some really good songs on the soundtrack here. You got "Good Vibrations," "Taking Care of Business," "I Will Survive," "Every Breath You Take," and then a different rendition of "Heroes" that wasn't the David Bowie one, but again, "Heroes" is just such a great song that I'm gonna love it no matter who sings it for the most part. So there's some
Yeah,
really good kind of musical choices in here to really spike up the soundtrack a bit and again give it just like that fun energetic vibe. Like this movie, like we said, it is about balance, but it's also about just having a good fun time with it as well.
exactly.
And kind of heading into that, Jim, we were talking about this a little bit earlier. Is this a movie we think could be like remade or redone, or is it something that would work even today if it was a movie done today but placed back in the 80s?
Uh, yeah, it could. There's a couple of things in there that are very specific to the 2000s, like the girl who plays the lead cheerleader is excellent, but unfortunately, there's a part that could be misconstrued nowadays where she has to replace the cheerleaders as well, and most of them come from the local strip club, and
Also hilarious.
they are used to sort of distract the other team, but sort of not. It's kind of an interesting element, but like I said, the lead cheerleader is really a really underrated actress, and she gets along great with Keanu Reeves. That they really felt believable as a couple. I forgot to mention that earlier.
Mhm.
But most of the elements are actually pretty tame. So I think if they tried to remake it nowadays, I don't think they should because Hollywood should just try to make more original stuff. But and I think if it was rebranded as like the 1980s, like kind of a parody of what happened in 1987 with the Washington Redskins, then it probably would work. But again, they would probably try to make it more Animal House than it was, and that was probably permissible in the early 2000s.
Hmm. Yeah. I find it kind of interesting that we are seeing this big, a sort of, I'm not saying renaissance, but like going back to like a lot of 1980s content recently. I think that started a little bit with Captain Marvel, which we saw, which went back to like late 80s, early 90s. Now we're seeing that with Wonder Woman 84 and a lot of remakes of movies that came out in the 80s, now that I think about it.
Yeah, yeah.
And so
Sorry.
Oh yeah, and I find it just interesting. I don't think they should remake it. I agree with you, Jim. That's Hollywood should be making more original content. They're trying to play a lot of safe ball right now with just remaking stuff they know people are familiar with instead of trying new things. And also with that, I think a big reason why this wouldn't really work as a remake is that Keanu and Hackman just make this movie for me. They are the two pieces,
Yeah,
that, like the two pillars that hold everything else up. Because I think if you had just two other kind of run of the mill actors in there, it wouldn't be able to support the film. It wouldn't make it as edgy enough. It wouldn't bring the power in the moments where they do need to have like those real emotional, strong moments. Like before the first game when Keanu's out in the field, kind of, reminiscing, trying to think about, am I going to fail again? And Hackman comes out and just coaches him up. It's a real great moment between two really strong actors that really just, again, thrive that movie forward. It gives it that sense of drive that I think if you replace with two other actors, it would just fall apart, in my opinion.
exactly. Yeah, it does come down to the chemistry between everybody. Hackman really does bring that kind of grandfatherly edge, which he was kind of on his way out of his career at this point. I think he retired only a few years after this, but he was still bringing his A game to everything he touched. And he does come off as a real coach. Like he doesn't try to baby anybody. He actually can be quite like a coach. He could be really nice to you, but he could also be really cruel to you if you deserve it. And you're right. Like the team chemistry wouldn't work. You know, it's very specific to this group. And honestly, this is the kind of movie where I kind of pray that they don't remake it because it exists kind of as its own thing. And I think that's why it kind of appeals to us is that, like I said earlier, you can't quite box this movie in. It's just kind of this it has its own unique identity, which I think is why we still watch it, and I think it's always on cable TV. is that people still kind of connect to it and they have a good laugh and off they go.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And so, in kind of like wrapping up, I think in my final thoughts that, again, like Jim said, it exists in its own. It shouldn't be remade. I don't think this would really work super well as a like a 10-part Netflix series or even a remake the entire movie. I think there would be a lot of things you would have to change about it. And again, when you take away and try to change things that make this movie kind of fun and energetic, I think you really are going to lose a lot of that spirit with it. And so, my final thoughts, I would rank this movie probably somewhere around like, I would say like a 6.5, maybe probably more of a 7 out of 10. There's a lot that's like wrong with it. There's some sloppy editing. There's some scenes where they literally or cuts where they use like the same second or two of footage later in the movie. It's not like the best produced, but again, it's just so much fun. It's I may think of it slightly as a cult classic for your average Joe sort of like football bro. But other than that, to me, it's just a fun time, and I'll always enjoy watching it whenever it's on TV.
Yeah, I agree. I'd probably put it at a 6.5 or a 7 myself, but I would definitely classify this as a diamond in the rough, which is exactly what this movie is about. You find the diamond in the rough, you give people a second chance, and again, really fun movie. Not always the best, like you said. I too noticed a little bit of sloppy filmmaking, but that probably comes from the very low budget. It was just kind of meant to put it out in theaters, make some money, make some people happy, and probably just go to the bargain bin. And it really shouldn't be in the bargain bin. I think it does hold up as a film, and it still delivers.
Mhm.
Unlike a lot of movies from the early 2000s, which would probably warrant its own podcast talking about just 2000 to 2005, just what kind of content was produced. Uh, this one still, this one's still a touchdown for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, again, thank you for watching Jim and Parker's excellent podcast. Again, if you're a professional athlete, please let us know. We'd love to talk to you. But until next time, I'm Parker Glazner,
I'm Jim Crowley.
and we'll see you next time on Jim and Parker's excellent podcast.
Excellent.